Maya had always been different from other girls her age. While her friends spent hours talking about their crushes and dating drama, she found herself analyzing why people fell in love instead of just experiencing it. As a psychology student, in her final year, she treated emotions like math problems that needed solving. She spent most of her time in the university library, surrounded by thick books about human behavior and relationship patterns. Her notebook was filled with theories about attachment styles, dopamine responses, and the psychology behind romantic attraction. Maya love was just another human behavior that could be studied, measured, and understood through careful observation. Campus coffee shop was her favorite place to people watch. She would sit in the corner with her laptop, pretending to study while actually observing couples around her. She noticed how they mirrored each other's body language, how their voices changed when they talked to each other, and how they seemed to follow predictable patterns in their conversations. One Tuesday afternoon, everything changed when Alex walked into the coffee shop. He was tall with messy brown hair and carried a worn leather bag filled with poetry books. Maya watched him order his usual black coffee and noticed how he always said thank you twice to the barista. He had this gentle way of moving through the world that caught her attention immediately. But Maya's interest in Alex wasn't romantic at first. She saw him as the perfect subject for her unofficial research project. He seemed genuine, trusting, and emotionally open. Exactly the type of person she needed to study how romantic feelings develop and grow stronger over time. Alex was a literature student who believed in the power of words and genuine human connection. He had no idea that the smart, confident girl watching him from across the coffee shop was already planning to make him part of her psychological experiment. When Maya finally approached him, pretending to need help with her laptop, Alex was immediately drawn to her sharp intelligence and mysterious smile. Their first conversation lasted 3 hours. Alex talked about his favorite poets while Maya asked carefully crafted questions designed to understand his emotional responses. She learned that he was sensitive, had grown up in a small town, and believed in true love despite having his heart broken before. Every piece of information was valuable data that Maya mentally filed away for later analysis. Maya started timing her coffee shop visits to match Alex's schedule. She would arrive 10 minutes before him and position herself where he would naturally notice her. When he finally asked for her phone number, she felt a small thrill of success. Phase 1 of her study was complete. Over the next few weeks, Maya began implementing what she privately called her research methodology. She would respond to Alex's text messages at carefully calculated intervals, sometimes replying immediately to create positive reinforcement, other times waiting hours to study his reaction to uncertainty. She documented everything in a private notebook she kept locked in her desk drawer. Alex experienced these interactions as the natural excitement of getting to know someone new. When Maya took time to respond to his messages, he assumed she was busy with her studies. When she replied quickly, with long, thoughtful responses, he felt like he was getting to know the real her. He had no idea that every interaction was being analyzed and recorded. Maya found herself genuinely enjoying their conversations, even as she maintained her clinical perspective. Alex had a way of seeing beauty in ordinary things that fascinated her. When he described how morning light looked different in autumn, or how certain songs could transport him to specific memories, Maya felt something stirring inside her that she couldn't quite categorize as data. Their first official date was at a small bookstore downtown. Maya had suggested it because she wanted to observe Alex in his natural element. She watched how his eyes lit up when he talked about his favorite authors, how he gently touched the spines of books as he walked through the aisles, how he seemed to forget about everything else when he was passionate about a topic. Alex was completely unaware that Maya was studying him. To him, her intense attention felt like genuine interest in his thoughts and feelings. When she asked detailed questions about his emotional responses to different books, he thought she was just being a good listener. He had never met anyone who seemed so interested in understanding how his mind worked. Maya's notebook began filling with observations about Alex's behavior patterns. She noted that he touched his hair when he was nervous, that he always offered to pay for coffee, and that he seemed to need emotional reassurance more than most people. She documented his body language, his speech patterns, and his emotional responses to different situations. But something unexpected started happening. As Maya collected her data, she found herself looking forward to seeing Alex for reasons that had nothing to do with her research. She started noticing things about him that weren't relevant to her study, like how he always held doors open for strangers, or how he remembered small details about conversations they'd had weeks earlier. The psychology student who had always approached relationships like science experiments was about to discover that some human experiences resist analysis. Maya thought she was studying Alex, but she had no idea that her carefully controlled experiment was about to spiral into something much more complicated and real than anything she'd ever studied in her textbooks. As their relationship developed, Maya maintained her dual identity as both girlfriend and researcher. She continued documenting Alex's responses while simultaneously experiencing genuine moments of connection with him. The line between observation and participation was becoming blurrier with each passing day, setting the stage for discoveries that would challenge everything Maya thought she knew about love and human connection. 2 months into their relationship, Maya's research had become much more sophisticated. Her bedroom desk was now covered with color-coded charts tracking Alex's emotional responses to different situations. She had graphs showing his texting patterns, notes about his body language during various conversations, and detailed observations about what made him happy or anxious. Maya had developed what she secretly called her emotional testing system. She would create specific scenarios to see how Alex would react, then carefully document everything. If she wanted to study his response to uncertainty, she would cancel plans at the last minute and watch how he handled disappointment. If she wanted to understand his attachment style, she would become distant for a few days and observe how desperately he tried to reconnect. The most interesting part of her research was studying Alex's pursuit behavior. Maya discovered that when she pulled away emotionally, Alex would double his efforts to win her attention back. He would send longer text messages, suggest more creative date ideas, and become more physically affectionate when they were together. It was exactly what her psychology textbooks had predicted about anxious attachment patterns. Alex had no idea he was being studied like a lab rat. When Maya suddenly became cold and distant, he thought she was just having a bad week with her studies. When she canceled their dinner plans to work on assignments, he worried he had done something wrong. He would lie awake at night analyzing their last conversation, trying to figure out what he could do to make her smile again. Maya's notebook entries became more detailed with each passing week. She wrote about how Alex's voice changed when he was trying to hide his hurt feelings, how he would laugh a little too loudly when he was nervous, and how he always apologized even when nothing was his fault. She noted that he needed constant reassurance and seemed to measure his self-worth by how much attention she gave him. The psychological manipulation was working perfectly. Maya could predict Alex's responses with almost scientific accuracy. When she ignored his calls for 2 days, he would show up at her apartment with flowers and an apology for whatever he thought he had done wrong. When she suddenly showered him with affection after being distant, he would become incredibly grateful and more emotionally invested than before. But Alex wasn't completely unaware that something felt different about their relationship. Sometimes he would catch Maya staring at him with an expression that seemed more analytical than loving. During their conversations, she would ask strangely specific questions about his feelings, as if she was trying to understand the mechanics of his emotions rather than simply caring about them. Maya's research methods became more creative over time. She started testing his jealousy responses by mentioning other guys from her classes, studying how his face would change when she talked about spending time with male friends. She experimented with different communication styles to see which ones made him feel most secure or most anxious. The strangest part was how Alex seemed to enjoy these intense emotional conversations. When Maya asked him to describe exactly how he felt when she didn't respond to his messages, he thought she was showing deep interest in his inner world. He had never had a girlfriend who seemed so curious about his thoughts and feelings. Maya's apartment became like a research laboratory. She would review her notes each night after Alex left, analyzing patterns in his behavior and planning her next emotional experiment. She had folders full of screenshots of their text conversations, with her own annotations about his word choices and response times. The psychology student in Maya was fascinated by how predictable human behavior could be. She could make Alex happy by sending him a good morning text, or make him anxious by taking hours to respond to his questions. She felt like she was playing an emotional piano, and Alex was responding to every note exactly as she expected. But something unexpected started happening around the third month. Maya began noticing that her own behavior was changing too. When she saw Alex's genuine happiness after she complimented him, she felt a warm feeling in her chest that had nothing to do with research satisfaction. When she made him sad through her emotional distancing experiments, she started feeling genuinely bad about hurting him. Alex, meanwhile, was falling deeper in love with someone who was essentially performing a role. He loved Maya's intelligence, her mysterious nature, and how she seemed to understand him better than anyone ever had. He had no idea that her understanding came from systematic observation rather than genuine emotional connection. Maya's friends started noticing changes in her behavior too. She would cancel plans to spend time reviewing her research notes, and she seemed more interested in talking about psychological theories than her actual relationship experiences. They thought she was just being her usual analytical self, but Maya knew she was walking a dangerous line between science and real life. The most challenging part of Maya's experiment was maintaining her emotional distance while pretending to be a loving girlfriend. She had to remember to act surprised by Alex's reactions, even when she had deliberately caused them. She had to fake spontaneity while following her carefully planned research schedule as their relationship continued. Maya realized she was conducting the most comprehensive study of romantic attachment she had ever attempted. Alex was providing her with perfect data about how love develops, how emotional bonds strengthen, and how people respond to different relationship dynamics. But the experiment was becoming more complicated than Maya had anticipated. The line between researcher and participant was starting to blur in ways that would soon challenge everything she thought she knew about love, manipulation, and genuine human connection. 4 months into what Maya still considered her research project, something completely unexpected started happening. The psychological experiment she had so carefully designed was producing results she never saw coming. Every night, as she sat at her desk reviewing her notes about Alex's behavior, she found herself smiling at memories that had nothing to do with data collection. It started with small moments that caught her off guard. When Alex brought her soup when she was sick, Maya felt genuinely touched instead of simply noting his caretaking behavior in her research journal. When he remembered that she didn't like horror movies and suggested a comedy instead, she felt warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with studying his thoughtfulness patterns. Maya's carefully maintained emotional distance was cracking in ways that terrified her. She had spent months treating Alex like a fascinating subject, but now she was starting to see him as just Alex, the guy who left silly notes in her textbooks, who called his grandmother every Sunday, and who got genuinely excited about finding old books at garage sales. The worst part was that Maya couldn't tell anyone about her internal struggle. How could she explain to her friends that she was falling for someone she had been systematically manipulating? How could she admit that her scientific approach to love was backfiring in the most human way possible? Meanwhile, Alex was starting to notice things that made him uncomfortable. Maya's questions about his feelings had always seemed deep and caring, but lately they felt almost clinical. When she asked him to rate his happiness on a scale of 1 to 10, or when she wanted detailed explanations of his emotional responses to their arguments, something felt off. The breakthrough moment came on a rainy Thursday evening. Alex had come over to study, and Maya stepped away to get some water. When she returned, she found him staring at her desk, holding her research notebook that she had forgotten to put away. His face was completely white, and his hands were shaking slightly. Maya's heart stopped. The notebook was open to a page titled Subject A, Emotional Response Patterns. Below that were detailed notes about Alex's behavior, complete with graphs showing his texting frequency, charts tracking his mood changes, and clinical observations about his attachment style. Everything was there, months of systematic study. Laid bare in black and white, Alex looked up at her with eyes full of confusion and hurt. "What is this?" he asked quietly. His voice was barely above a whisper, but Maya could hear the pain in every word. "Am I some kind of experiment to you?" Maya's mind raced as she tried to figure out how to explain what couldn't be explained. How do you tell someone you care about that you started dating them to study their emotional responses? How do you make them understand that somewhere along the way, the fake feelings became real? "Alex, I can explain," she started, but the words felt hollow even as she spoke them. There was no explanation that would make this okay. No way to undo months of deception and manipulation. Alex flipped through more pages of the notebook, his expression growing more devastated with each entry. He found the section where Maya had documented his responses to her emotional distance experiments. He read her notes about how predictable his pursuit behavior was, how easy it was to make him jealous, and how his need for reassurance could be triggered on command. "You planned all of this," he said, his voice getting stronger, but also more hurt. "Every fight we had, every time you pulled away and I came running back, you were studying me like some kind of lab rat." Maya felt tears starting to form in her eyes, but she couldn't tell if they were from guilt or from the fear of losing Alex. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," she tried to explain. "I was studying attachment theory, and you seemed like the perfect subject. But then what?" Alex interrupted, anger finally breaking through his initial shock. "Then you decided to keep experimenting on me anyway? How long were you planning to keep this up?" The question hung in the air between them like a wall. Maya realized she had never actually planned an end to her research. She had been so focused on collecting data and analyzing Alex's responses that she hadn't thought about what would happen when the experiment was over. Alex closed the notebook and set it down carefully on her desk. "I need to think about this," he said quietly. "I need to figure out what was real and what was just part of your research project." After he left, Maya sat alone in her apartment, staring at the notebook that had caused so much damage. For the first time in months, she wasn't thinking about Alex as a research subject. She was thinking about him as the person she had somehow fallen for while trying to study him. The irony wasn't lost on her. Maya had started this experiment to understand how love develops, but she had ended up experiencing it herself in the most complicated way possible. She had manipulated Alex's emotions while accidentally developing real feelings for him. Maya's phone buzzed with a text from Alex. "I need some time to process this. Please don't contact me for a while." Reading those words, Maya felt something she had never experienced before: the genuine fear of losing someone she truly cared about. For the first time since starting her research, Maya closed the notebook and put it away. The experiment was over, but the real test was just beginning. She had to figure out if genuine love could grow from dishonest beginnings, whether Alex would ever be able to trust her again, the psychology student who had thought she could. Study love without experiencing it was about to learn that some human emotions are too complex and powerful to be controlled by even the most carefully planned experiments. 3 weeks passed in complete silence. Maya checked her phone constantly, hoping for any message from Alex, but nothing came. She had respected his request for space, but the waiting was killing her. For the first time in her life, Maya understood what heartbreak actually felt like, and it was nothing like the clinical descriptions she had read in her psychology textbooks. The irony of her situation became painfully clear during those lonely weeks. Maya had spent months studying Alex's emotional responses, but now she was experiencing the same intense feelings she had been analyzing: the anxiety, the constant checking of her phone, the way her mood depended entirely on whether she had heard from him when she was living through every pattern she had documented in her research notes. Maya's friends noticed the dramatic change in her behavior. She stopped going to classes regularly, barely ate, spent most of her time staring at her research notebook with a mixture of regret and longing. When they asked what was wrong, she couldn't bring herself to explain the full truth. How could? She'd tell them she had fallen in love with someone she had been secretly studying. During those 3 weeks, Maya made a decision that surprised even herself. She took all her research notes about Alex and locked them away in a drawer. She couldn't bring herself to throw them away completely, but she also couldn't stand looking at the evidence of how she had manipulated someone she now cared about deeply. Meanwhile, Alex was going through his own emotional journey. The initial shock and anger had given way to something more complicated. He found himself missing Maya, despite knowing their entire relationship had been built on deception. The worst part was that he couldn't tell which moments between them had been genuine and which had been part of her experiment. Alex spent hours replaying their conversations, trying to figure out what was real. When Maya had comforted him after his grandfather's funeral, had she genuinely cared about his pain? Or was she just studying his grief response? When she laughed at his jokes, was it real laughter or just positive reinforcement to keep him engaged in her research? The confusion was eating at him. Alex had never felt more connected to someone than he had with Maya, but now he wondered if that connection had been completely one-sided. Had he been falling in love with someone who was essentially performing a role? After 3 weeks of internal struggle, Alex finally sent Maya a text. "Can we talk? I think I'm ready now." Maya's heart jumped when she saw the message. She had been waiting for this moment, but now that it was here, she felt terrified about what Alex might say. They met at a small park near campus, the same place where they had their first real conversation about poetry and life. The setting felt both familiar and strange, like returning to a place that held completely different meanings now. Alex looked tired when he arrived, like he hadn't been sleeping well. Maya wanted to comfort him, but she wasn't sure if she had the right to care about his well-being anymore. They sat on a bench with careful distance between them, both unsure how to begin. "I've been thinking about everything," Alex said finally. "About us, about your research, about what was real and what wasn't." His voice was quiet but steady. "I realized something that might surprise you." Maya held her breath, preparing herself for whatever he was about to say. "I think some of it was real," Alex continued. "Not the manipulation part, and not the studying part. But I think somewhere in all of that, you started to actually care about me." Maya felt tears beginning to form in her eyes. "Alex, I am so sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. I never meant to hurt you." "I know," he said, and his voice was gentler than she expected. "That's what makes this so complicated. I can tell the difference between when you were studying me and when you were just being yourself with me." Maya was amazed by his insight. Even after everything, Alex seemed to understand her better than she understood herself. "The question is," Alex continued, "can we build something real from something that started so wrong? Can I trust you again? Can you stop seeing me as a research subject and start seeing me as just a person?" Maya realized that Alex was giving her a chance she didn't deserve. She was willing to consider moving forward, but only if she could prove that her feelings were genuine now. "I don't know," Maya answered honestly. "I've never been in love before. I thought I could study it without experiencing it, but I was wrong about everything." Alex smiled slightly for the first time since the revelation. "So you're saying you're in love with me?" Maya nodded, feeling vulnerable in a way she had never experienced. "I think I started falling for you months ago, but I was too focused on my research to notice. I'm sorry it took me so long to realize what was happening." "The funny thing is," Alex said, "I started watching you two after I found your notebook. I wanted to understand if your feelings were real or if you were still experimenting. I guess that makes me a researcher too now." They both laughed, and for a moment the tension between them eased. Maya realized that Alex had been studying her behavior just as carefully as she had studied his. The tables had turned in a way that neither of them had expected. "So where do we go from here?" Maya asked. Alex looked at her seriously. "We start over. No more experiments. No more manipulation. Just two people trying to figure out if they can build something honest together." Maya felt hope for the first time in weeks. Maybe real love could grow from fake beginnings, but only if both people were willing to be completely honest moving forward. 6 months later, Maya and Alex sat in the same coffee shop where they had first met. The familiar smell of coffee and the sound of students studying brought back memories of their complicated beginning. But everything between them had changed. Completely, Maya had kept her promise to Alex about starting over. She had thrown away all her research notes about him and stopped analyzing his behavior. It was harder than she had expected. For months, she had to fight the urge to document his responses or create theories about his emotional patterns. Learning to just experience moments with Alex instead of studying them was like learning a completely new language. Alex had been patient with her during this adjustment period. He understood that Maya's analytical nature was part of who she was, and he didn't expect her to completely change overnight. But he also made it clear that he would know immediately if she started, treating him like a research subject again. Their new relationship was built on complete honesty. Maya told Alex about her childhood, about why she'd always been more comfortable analyzing emotions than feeling them. She explained how her parents' divorce had made her believe that love was too unpredictable and dangerous to trust. Studying relationships had felt safer than actually participating in them. Alex shared his own fears about being vulnerable with someone again. He admitted that discovering Maya's research had made him question his judgment about people. He had always prided himself on being a good judge of character, but Maya's deception had shaken his confidence in his ability to tell. When someone was being genuine, the process of rebuilding trust was slow and sometimes painful. There were moments when Alex would catch Maya looking at him with what seemed like analytical interest, and he would have to ask her directly what she was thinking. Maya learned to recognize these moments and explain her thoughts honestly, even when they were embarrassing. One of the biggest challenges was learning to have normal relationship problems. When they disagreed about something, Alex would sometimes wonder if Maya was testing his responses. Maya had to learn to express her genuine feelings without it seeming like she was conducting an experiment. But gradually, something beautiful began to emerge from their complicated beginning. Maya discovered that experiencing love was far more interesting than studying it. The way Alex made her laugh, the comfort she felt when he held her hand, the excitement of planning their future together. None of these feelings could be captured in research notes or explained by psychological theories. Alex learned to trust his instincts about Maya's authenticity. He could tell the difference between her genuine emotions and her analytical moments. When Maya was truly happy, her whole face lit up in a way that couldn't be faked. When she was worried about something, she would unconsciously play with her hair, a habit that had nothing to do with research and everything to do with being human. Maya's friends finally learned the truth about their relationship's unusual beginning. Instead of being shocked, most of them admitted they weren't surprised. They had always known Maya approached relationships differently than other people. What surprised them was how much she had changed since falling in love with Alex. The Maya who had once treated emotions like math problems now talked about feelings with genuine warmth. She still loved psychology, but she had learned that some human experiences were too complex and personal to be reduced to academic theories. Love, she discovered, is one of those experiences. Alex's friends were more concerned about whether he could really trust someone who had manipulated him for months. But Alex explained that Maya's deception had actually taught him something valuable about himself. He'd learned to pay attention to his instincts and to ask for honesty when something felt wrong. Their relationship became stronger because they had worked through such a difficult beginning. They knew they could survive major challenges together, and they had learned to communicate about complicated emotions. Many couples never have to face the kind of trust issues that Maya and Alex had overcome. Maya's research project had officially ended, but she had learned more about love than any textbook could have taught her. She discovered that love isn't just about predictable patterns and emotional responses. It's about choosing to be vulnerable with someone, about building trust over time, about accepting that some feelings can't be analyzed or controlled. Alex had learned that people are more complicated than they first appear. Maya's capacity to change and grow had surprised him. The person who had once treated him like a research subject had become someone who valued his happiness above her own curiosity about human behavior. As they sat in the coffee shop, Maya reached across the table and took Alex's hand. "I have a confession to make," she said with a smile. "I've been studying you again." Alex's expression immediately became serious. "Maya, you promised, ... I've been studying how happy you make me, she interrupted, and I've concluded that some research is worth doing for the rest of my life. Alex laughed and squeezed her hand. Well, I've been doing some research too. I've been studying how it feels to be genuinely loved by someone, and I think I'd like to continue that experiment indefinitely. Maya realized that her greatest discovery hadn't been about love in general. It had been about her own capacity to love and be loved. She had started their relationship as a researcher trying to understand human emotions, but she had ended up as a human being finally experiencing them. Their love story would always have an unusual beginning, but Maya and Alex had learned that authentic connections can grow from the most unexpected places. Sometimes the best research comes from putting down the notebook and simply living the experience.